So I want to welcome onto the show Michael Collins, founder of sugaraddiction.com and board chairman of Food Addiction Institute. Michael has been completely sugar-free for over 30 years and has worked closely with others to help them regain their lives that have been ravaged by this addictive product. Mike has been in recovery from substance abuse disorder for over 34 years, and he's raised 2 children sugar-free from the womb to over 6 years old when they only had sugar once a month for their entire childhood. So Mike, I read on your website that years ago you said you'd been trying for years to quit sugar, but the fact was that you couldn't do it alone. You needed help. Could you give the audience some context and backstory about what led you up to this moment of realizing you couldn't do it alone?
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. It's a good question. And one, I didn't really put I think more in hindsight that I put all that puzzle together. As you mentioned in the introduction, I was a little bit of a partier when I was younger, and I got sober at 28 years old. And when I was after sobriety, a lot of what happens in recovery groups of mutual aid societies is that they substitute a lot of sugar, flour, and caffeine, and nicotine, by the way, and it becomes like this giant coffee and sugar clutch. It's just great, and nobody's using hard drugs or alcohol, but it doesn't. They talk about the freshman 15, right? It's like this is like the freshman 50, right? Like people just gain a lot of weight really fast in the early days of recovery, and if they don't pay attention, you can keep that up and it gets really bad. So I started to notice the similarities of that kind of stuff. And I started researching and read a couple books and like that. There wasn't a lot of information back then, almost none. So I had to dig it out, but I did find some. Well, Sugar Blues was one of them, great book. And I started to recognize the need for community, and I started to talk. I did visit a few food groups. There wasn't many out there, the addictive kind of food groups, and I got some opinions about all that too, but that didn't help too much. So I started to work out with some guys who were, I guess, luckily for me, advanced a little bit. Mm. They were understanding that sugar and these kind of things could affect your performance. And so it was that group of mentorship that really kind of got me off the sugar totally.
Yeah, you said again on your website that you needed people who were doing the same thing as you, not your family. You needed people who were thinking differently, people who had reached a point in their life where nothing else mattered and that they were doing things different. Mm. So this group of guys that were advanced, how were they thinking different?
Well, they were athletic, number one. That was part of it. And that was, but the sugar part, or the diet part, was a kind of a fluke back then. I actually think that's even worse today, since the 80s, when high fructose corn syrup and the whole Ansel Keys kind of fat, demonizing fat kind of thing came into the diet. And the obesity numbers went crazy. In today's society, this is an evolutionary thing over 300 years, but in the last 40, it's been really bad, where now 80% of the products in the grocery store contain some kind of sugar, or some kind of hidden sugar or added sugar or whatever. And as a society, it's more difficult that if you are trying to be normal, be part of society, you can't really... it's so integrated in partying and celebrations and everything. There's food pushers like there's drug pushers. People, they baked it for you especially. They bought it for you especially. And it's just it's still not a real well-known thing that if you're that in, the minute minority of folks who don't want to use sugar, it's lonely, and we're tribe animals. We need to have folks that we're at least, and I don't say people always worry that you got to leave your family, leave your workmates, but if you were to get a great job or get on an athletic team, you'd still have your family and your workmates, but you'd be running, you'd be cycling with this group and running with that group, and you'd go to a celebration with that group. it's okay to join another tribe and join another group of people, a community. And nothing has proved more successful in the history of recovery from drugs and alcohol, or even now in cancer type recoveries than communities like that. So that's what.
Yeah. And I remember on your website reading that you have a community, but you said something interesting. It was something like, correct me if I get this wrong, that control sugar, like almost being abstinent from sugar, was maybe impossible, but that your community was based around helping people be at peace with their relationship with sugar. Correct me if I got any of that wrong.
No, you're not. It's not wrong in that you have to make the decision for yourself. I mean, we're not here to diagnose you in any way. You have to look back over 10 or 15 years and how many times you've attempted to quit and couldn't, and there is for sure, and the folks at the Food Addiction Institute, MDs, PhDs, owners of treatment centers have kind of chronicled this over, it was established in 2005, but I mean, they've chronicled that about a third of people are biochemically unable to handle flour and sugar in their body without setting up amazing cravings and kind of almost an OCD loop where they're just fixated on it and they got to have it. And that really goes away if they don't ingest it. So those folks do need abstinence. And then there's another group of people, about a third of folks, and the obesity numbers kind of model this third and a third and a third framework. About a third of folks, they can kind of go either way. If they realize that they've been abusing the stuff, they can quit. They're not really as obsessed with it. They're not biochemically attracted to it. If they ingest it, they don't get all these cravings. And then there's that third of people who we all hate. They can just take it or leave it. They whatever. They have one cookie and don't have another one for a month, and don't even think about having another one for a month. So it's broken down that way. Just like a third of the population is overweight, a third of the population is obese, and a third of the population is normal size. And you can be a normal size sugar addict. Don't get me wrong. That's possible. But it is more your psyche, and we'll get into it, I hope. To me, the real new science, the real thing, that not what it's doing to your body and the damage it's doing to your body, but the reward chemicals in the brain and why you can't quit, right? The dopamine, serotonin, all of the GABA, norepinephrine, even your adrenals are affected by this, and the science has exploded in the last 5 years, and that's the stuff is the reason you can't quit it.
Yeah. So back in the day when you started learning about these things, were you one of you mentioned two-thirds of people, 1/3 is chemically dependent on it, and the other third was once they became aware of it. Which third were you in?
I finally got a good interviewer. People are always telling me or asking me these softball questions. That's a great question. And the idea is that I'm an addict, and I'm not ashamed or afraid to say it. When I first got sober for 20 years, my parents were alive, and, I was anonymous like most people are. But the bottom line is I'm not afraid of the word addiction, and I don't I got to use another analogy, but I don't sugarcoat it. That until you kind of at least accept that, like nicotine, maybe not heroin, maybe not cocaine, but that sugar could be an addiction like a nicotine, that for some folks, when you ingest, crazy, strange things happen. And more importantly, that over 20 or 30 years, possibly longer, you have rewired your brain to figure out, to act in such a way that when you have an emotion, an upset, a hurt, a guilt, a pain, a shame, or whatever, you reach for this ubiquitous product. And that reward, that calming, that soothing, actually is really powerful to you in your body. And it will take time to get to the other side of that. And again, the answer to your question is I'm an addict, and it's okay to be one.
Awesome. I love it.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when you started learning about the psyche and this journey, what did you learn? Because you've been able to raise children that are sugar-free. You've written this book on Amazon, The Last Resort Sugar Detox Guide. What did you start to learn in the very beginning of your journey that enabled you to years down the line do these things?
It's a great setup for the evolution that I believe in, which is the evolution and the progression, the positive progression of recovery in general, food recovery for sure, alcohol and drug recovery as well. And you've seen the alcohol and drug recovery stigma reduction attempts with the opioid crisis. Like, they're not, this is for healthcare that they're trying to make people aware. This is for not for, we want to be junkies, alcoholics, and all this kind of crap. This is for healthcare, right? And so, but back in the day, I was an abstinence-based guy here. I was a guy who, when I decided that there's something's got to go, and I didn't snap my fingers and it happened. I had help. Don't get me wrong. But when it did happen, I did not go back, So I think that abstinence-based stuff did help me. I have softened considerably over the years, both in drugs and alcohol and in sugar and flour, in that, and the opioid crisis, in my day, if you did Suboxone or say methadone or something like that, you were not considered clean. But today, you got to be freaking alive to get out of the opioid crisis. It's okay. And so, and I also found that, in sugar and flour, as we've mentioned, society's unforgiving for the folks who try to be different in a lot of ways and not in that tribe. And so it takes time, and people make their own choices, and any reduction is going to be good. But the people that I talk about in that first third, the most successful way, instead of going yo-yoing back and forth, is to just go abstinent and see what happens. Look, people will, I tell them not to eat steak for a year, right? A month or whatever. They do it if they, but the sugar thing really throws them, that they, somehow they're attached to it in a way that's not really like a food, right? So that should be a clue for them.
Yeah, you're highlighting that sugar is such a part of our culture, our relationships, that maybe once someone, I like that too, by the way, that advice that if someone wants to start it, just try abstinent, but have a curious mindset, see what happens. Yeah. It sounds like you're highlighting that sugar, once you start trying to be abstinent, it's going to bring up these tough feelings. Like it's not as easy to just set down. It sneaks back into your life.
You're hitting the nail on the head of both the reason they can't quit, the reason that they, the reason this is an issue in society in general. It's all focused around the exploding science and the understanding now in the last 5 years of the emotions and the brain science. And that's exactly what happens. People literally, there's a great kind of very well-known norm in the world of recovery from alcohol and drugs, and that is that if you started using drugs or alcohol when you were 14 or 15 or 16-year-old, that's when you stopped maturing emotionally, right? And so you're dealing with a 30, 40, 50-year-old woman or man who is basically a teenager, and they act and kind of emotionally handle the world as a teenager. Take a look at this sugar thing, right? And take a look at a recovering person who's honest, who's lost 100 or 200, 300 pounds, who's really dropped to a regular sized body, a right sized body for them, and gone through the recovery change process that you and I are discussing today. Those folks will say that they weren't a teenager, they were a child, right? They will honestly confront or honestly tell you that they could not handle emotions of hurt, anger, pain, angst, worry, fear, frustration. They couldn't handle this without reaching for a product that would quell that and silence that for a little bit, because they had been used. Their mother probably used it on them when they were 1 and probably in the womb. So recalibrating your brain reward system takes time, right? It takes you time to get to the other side. And most people are not willing to put in that time and the work and effort it takes to get there.
How, in your book, The Last Resort Sugar Detox Guide, learn how to quickly and easily detox from sugar and stop cravings completely. Obviously you got to read the book to get the full information, but what are some principles and steps or, keys in the book that you bring up that helps people rewire. This word rewire their brain is becoming more and more commonplace. I think it's great. This idea that we've been wired a certain way and that we can rewire it. Mm-hmm. And I really appreciate the expectations you're setting, that it takes a while.
Yeah.
I think I like that. But what are some principles from the book that you can share?
Yeah, I mean, it's that would be a long answer, but the short version is that it's the food. Sure, people always they want a recipe book and a menu. They want a recipe book and a game plan on how to do this, right?
Yeah.
And obviously, Whole Foods is part of it. You can't eat food like substances. You have to eat real food. You can't eat sugar and flour and all these products and flour turns to sugar in your stomach. You can't. That's part of it. But the more important part is what we've been mentioning here is the emotional rewiring, the emotional relearning of, okay, so you're upset. You had a crappy day at work or whatever. The kids are bothering you. You've got to learn to call a friend, go to yoga, get a massage, get a mani-pedi. You've got to learn another self-soothing method. Think about the word and the term and the concept and the construct self-soothing, okay? So you're 2 and 3 years old, your mother's busy, maybe she had 2 or 3 kids, she's got a job, she's got a husband, blah, 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 and you're upset, right? Instead of taking the time to get down on your level and give you a hug and see what's it, she puts a cookie in your mouth and she sends you over to the TV, right? Well, this is a learning process that was forced upon you, and then you co-opted it for yourself. And this is something where you understood that if you're upset, mom's not home, you get a cookie, whatever, right? If you're lonely or sad or scared, you're going to eat a little extra cookies. Your boyfriend breaks up to you at 14, you're going to binge with your girlfriends. It's like, this is a coping mechanism that evolved from so very young. And the body, now we're starting to understand that the brain's reward system is being hijacked by these chemicals through this process of self-nurturing through substances, right? So yeah, it sounds complex, but at the end of the day, it's very simple. Abstinence plus a new self-soothing reward system that you integrate into your life, which sometimes takes effort. It doesn't take effort to eat. It does take effort to take a walk. It does take effort to call a friend. It does take effort to go to yoga. It does take effort to run. It takes effort to do stuff that our natural evolution has given us to soothe these things. So.
Yeah, I really appreciate how you're not giving people the cookie cutter approach. Just eat this, do this little emotional freedom technique and you'll be fine. Right. Really appreciate how you're setting the context of this has been a way of dealing and handling emotion since a long time. Yeah. And our early childhood experiences, 80% of the brain is wired by the time you're 3. So,
that first 1,000 days is so important.
Yeah. And so, really appreciate the self-soothing because you're right. There's what do they say? The parasympathetic nervous system. If I'm getting the relaxation one,
sure,
where you calm down, that takes effort. And it's almost like, I believe it's something similar to like a piano where, if I were to hop on a violin or piano, I'd probably play some chords that weren't so hot. But if I practiced it and sat down at the keyboard and tried to figure out different ways to make beautiful music, a year, a month, or, I get better at it.
100%.
Yeah.
No, that's exactly right. It is a practice, like a meditation practice or a yoga practice or a spiritual practice or a religious practice. Any kind of practice that brings a good thing into your life does take work and perfection. And we short-circuited that process for our children as children by being able to soothe. And it's a nice buzz, man. It relaxes you. It calms you. It cools you. I mean, it just chills you out to have some sugar and sit and watch the television or whatever it is, just having the product. I think of it as really, it gets no respect as a really good psychoactive that helps do those calm things or calm the body and the mind that way, right?
Yeah.
And add to that perfect storm of that sweet and we're attracted to it because nothing in nature that has fructose, the sweet molecule, is poisonous. We're attracted to it through evolution. And man, in this day and age, we've created a perfect storm to self-soothe with it, and uncoupling it is our challenge for the next 10, 15, 20, 30 years, is making people understand what happened evolutionarily in the food system and in our behavioral system, and then getting to the other side of it, right? And the getting to the other side of it is coming from a world of drug and alcohol recovery, granted, and people have a stigma about that, but the two are so similar that I think it bears melding them together a little bit,
Yeah. I'm reconsidering right now. And the sugar being a psychoactive drug, how it calms you. And I'm seeing it on that level as I speak to you right now. I totally see how it's like a drug.
Yeah. It's a very
it's so
drug.
mainstream. It's so mainstream that this conversation about emotions really, and work and, thinking different, right? Work and emotions and this stuff. It's not a simple cut it out of your diet fix. Work and emotions, that's not a diet fix. I can see how this is new.
Cutting it out of your diet, it doesn't work, right? The lore in scientific literature and in diets in general, and they have a big loser study done by the National Institutes of Health, and there's at least 100 studies on when people lose weight, in the first year, if they lose any substantial amount of weight, they usually gain it back and then some in the first year. And what happens is they can white knuckle, they can get through that 30, 50, 70, 100 days and lose a little weight and feel good about themselves, right? And then they say, well, let's put the record books away and we can, because all the diets say don't use the white stuff, right? That's any diet worth its salt. 99% of them, 98% of them say don't use the white stuff, right? And so they put that away for 2-3 months. And then all of a sudden they're like, I want to be back with everybody else. I want to be, and I hate the word normal, but they want to be normal. They want to be back to the tribe. And so every story of failure like that starts with, well, I was at the wedding or I was at my birthday party or whatever. And then they end up back in this, back in the old days, we said back in the sauce, but this is the back in the sugar, right? They ended up back in the sugar. And then they couldn't get out because it seems stronger the second or third or fourth time around. It seems like you don't want to go through those damn withdrawals again because the withdrawals are real, right? I mean, they're painful and annoying, and it's you don't want to go through them again. You don't think you got the time to go through them again. So yeah, it's I don't want to. I want to be able to show a simple way, but there are some complexities that I'm really happy that you're letting us uncover. It's really good.
Yeah. The cravings, when we go through a diet, it slows your metabolism. It can be seen as a life-threatening event, losing weight. And so the body, the second time around, it has, it's like if you eat poison on accident, your body will instinctively remember that poison, almost like alcohol poisoning. If you throw up, you don't want that alcohol the next day. It's poison. So
that didn't help. That doesn't stop many people.
Yeah. But it's kind of the same analogy. And then with dieting, it can become seen as a poison and the body resists it. So it's life-threatening. Coming back to these relationships, what, do you have any rules or perhaps rules are not the right word, guidelines, expectations? I like this word mindset, mindsets on how to approach social situations, especially since there's so much sugar at birthday parties and
that's a good one. That the social thing I find is one of the top 2 or 3 downfalls where, you're in a situation where you don't want to have the damn conversation again. You don't want to go, oh, well, I'm quitting sugar. Oh, I don't, the people say, because people they don't want to be mean or anything. They just want to keep you in the tribe. They just want to they baked a cake for you, or they bought a big spread for you, or wanted to buy you dessert at the restaurant, whatever. So yeah, the social thing is really important. And main tricks are people you don't know don't care. And people are really, they're really sensitive about it. I say, look, if it's your family, you probably have a credibility problem already, because you told them you're going to quit something for the last 10 years, right? But that credibility problem, you don't want to discuss it again, right? But people that you don't know, those folks are like, they don't care. And it takes a while for them to understand that, especially in a restaurant, right? One of the things I found, this is the greatest trick I've ever found. So you're in a restaurant, and you want to check what's in the sauce or what's in the this or that or whatever. Does this sauce have this barbecue or this whatever have sugar in it? And you say to the waiter, pointless, straight face, you say, does this have any sugar in it? I can't have sugar. And it's all of a sudden, this person diagnoses you like 2 seconds and says, oh, let me check. And they run back to the kitchen because they think you have diabetes. Whether you do or not, doesn't matter. All you have to say with a straight face is, does this have sugar in it? Because I can't have sugar. And all of a sudden they become your advocate, right? And you find out the answer to your question. Now, like twice in 30 years has someone asked me, do you have diabetes? Because they were diabetic, right? So that was twice in 30 years in a restaurant where I asked, does this have sugar in it? So there's a simple way, and there's lots of those little tricks that over time we've developed and our group has developed that I didn't even know about, that do work to keep people at bay long enough for you to get stronger and for them to accept your stance. So,
yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
That's pretty short and sweet. I could see that.
Yeah.
I could see myself responding like, oh yeah, probably, okay, let me
check. Run back in the kitchen. They check for you. They bring out these big books. They got these in chain restaurants. They got these books. Well, let me see. It's in here.
For your children, you've raised them, what was it, sugar-free, except once a month they had sugar, something like that. And then they're starting to play with other kids and everything like that.
Right.
Can you really make the claim they were sugar-free if they're going over to a play date and they're,
Well, here's the thing, and it's a good question because I believe in that process, and we're starting to do some of that stuff. We got a little Facebook group now, and we're doing some sugar-free work with some of our coaches' kids and like that. And in the first 4 years, yes, you have 100% control. There's no, you're not. They're not going to a party without you. So at 4 or 5 or 6 even, so so you have control. You're there, right? You could, occasionally you drop them off, but even under 4, you don't often drop them. Not in this day and age, drop them off anywhere. So that is one group. And then there's another group who's, have already been exposed. And that's another group. But I use my own children as guinea pigs. They did not have flour, sugar, or caffeine in the womb until they were 6 years old. And we were at a roller skating rink, and we were just tired. Because you end up fighting the grandparents, the parents, like you say, of other kids, the schools, Montessori school even, they were thinking we were depriving these children of something, right? But my kids didn't know what it was. They were not missing anything, and there was no sugar deficiency in their bloodstream. You know what I mean? They were fine, and they grew up healthy and brilliant, and it's not a problem. So that I don't see as a problem. People think of it, well, maybe it's a sociological thing or a psychology thing. Maybe they'll overreact when they get older. My kids are 30 years old, and they're twins. They're not drawn to these products. Personally, I believe, and obviously the science is not 100% there, but their brain was wired in such a way in those first 1,000 days that they are not attracted. They don't need it as self-soothing. They don't think of it as self-soothing. They go for a walk or run or whatever, go to the weights, and they do something different when they're upset or angry, And so it's a different phenomenon, right? It's a different way of looking at this issue or this problem. And I think it's the future. I believe it. Obviously, I was willing to use my own kids as a guinea pig, So anyway, so that's my take on all that. Yeah, can I say after 6 when they went off to a birthday party with their mom? I don't know. And I think that the base is the important part in the early days.
I see. You mentioned, well, what do you think about sugar being quote unquote the original drug? That seems like when we're talking about children, gateway drugs and
100%. There's an awesome video. I'll send your listeners over to it on YouTube of Eric Clapton. Eric Clapton is sitting in his $7 million treatment center in Antigua that he built with his own money to help people. Being interviewed by Ed Bradley of 60 Minutes, and Ed says to him, Eric, so this addiction thing, this started with heroin, right? And Eric Clapton says to Ed Bradley, no, Ed, it started with sugar. And Ed says, sugar? He said, I was eating bread and butter and sugar sandwiches when I was 6 years old to change my state. And I would use anything to change my state through my childhood until I discovered alcohol and drugs. And sugar was the first drug that I used. This is, someone who's cognizant. People all respect Eric in a lot of ways because of his recovery and his great musicianship, but and his commitment to the world of recovery and world of personal development, personal growth. So that's a good example of that. And for me personally, I've seen it so many times. It's actually in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous in a couple of places, that substituting sugar, and you've seen it in movies where when they're coming off heroin, they're putting orange juice and chocolate in their mouth and stuff. This is a common known substitution process. And that's on the other side. But coming up to it, leading up to it, as we have mentioned in this discussion, folks have used the product in a way that is emotional and has nothing to do with food or diet. And it's ubiquitous and almost free. You can get it almost anywhere. So consciously, the two things are not tied together. And even in the world, nutritionists don't think this way. Even the eating disorder folks don't think this way. The eating disorder folks think you should not demonize one food product. And they make the mistake that they're calling this a freaking food product when it's not a food product. It's a drug.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yes. Education is so important. Education is so important. No. I when I work with people too, it's like we think about what are we getting out of the foods that we're craving, and oftentimes when people are honest, it's like, wow, I got some excitement. I got my mind off work. I got to relax a little bit. It's these cravings, and I feel it. It's interesting too. Yeah. Cause sugar foods, they oftentimes, you're right. Just the other day, I was talking with a woman. She's at an eating disorder clinic down in Santa Barbara. And she felt a little bit uncomfortable there. She's been through her own recovery process, but they were essentially encouraging, I'll simplify the story, but essentially encouraging fast food because fast food is demonized, but kind of almost pushing fast food as a way to get over the fears. And so she felt a little bit uncomfortable with the pushing mentality of face your fears. This topic is real bleeding edge. And I really appreciate you bringing this up because I've never talked about this, to be honest, on a podcast, and I've done a lot of them. I've never broached this subject, and I didn't know where I stood and when I wanted to come out about it. And so one of my board members who I respect immensely, who's very experienced this, the other day was really drawing a better parallel for me. And what it was is that she believes that anorexia and bulimia and eating disorders in general are process addictions. They're not substance use disorders, right? Like gambling or sex or workaholism or like that. It's a process addiction that is augmented by the food and the use of food and the use of the body and the diet, right? But it's really a process addiction. And that... Wait, by process addiction,
I'm talking like gambling or sex addiction or workaholism.
It's like the whole reward thing.
The reward thing is in a different way. You're rewarded for purging. You're rewarding for
yes.
not eating. You get a little buzz when you go.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely, yeah.
So it's like you're activating those reward systems through a process addiction, using your body that way. But what I'm proffering and what the mission of the Food Addiction Institute is, and sugar addiction obviously, is that this truly is a substance use disorder and should be on the other side of the fence with the alcohol and drug folks. And that it just does, like Rodney Dangerfield, it gets no respect because they don't think of it as a powerful psychoactive. They don't think of it as a something that could elicit this kind of behavioral change, right? So here we are, right? A third of the population is obese. A third of it is overweight. And a lot of the people who are of right-sized body have metabolic syndrome because they're pounding sugar as well. And so at some point in time, we have to cross this bridge and have people understand that this may be a substance use disorder, and that the human body, and more importantly, the human brain and our reward system cannot handle this onslaught of 150 pounds of this stuff a year.
Yeah. I'm trying to, in my heart, I'm pulling together these different loose ends. Where I am a little caught is sometimes in the eating disorder field, there's this notion of unconditional eating where, like, if you are fed nutritionally and you're not starving yourself, you've got food in your belly, good food in your belly, then it's okay to have that thing you crave. And I've seen this work many times with people when they soothe themselves, when they are well fed, and then they have whatever they're binging on, and they're not doing it in a rushed binge state of mind, that they discover they don't like the food. So that's great on one hand, but on the other hand, I feel you with that's being a substance abuse. Like, if the person craved ice cream, sugary ice cream, then is it ethical, or what's the right thing to do when, do we tell them, go have ice cream now that you're well fed, you're in a calm state of mind? Do we have ice cream? There's many people on both sides of the fence. I'll tell you that. Like,
it's contentious. It's a very contentious argument, right? And very contentious. People are. Them are fighting words, kind of thing.
Yeah.
They're not like. They're like.
It gets heated.
These people build an entire career. Nutritionists and eating disorder build an entire career on these constructs and unwinding them and educating them. And really, to be honest, in a fair way, they did not have the science. The science has exploded in 5 years about the dopamine, serotonin, norepinephrine, GABA. Even your adrenals, and the big one, oxytocin. These things have the understanding of SSRIs and how that affects the serotonin. Even that research. I mean, that's parallel. It's a parallel research because it's affecting your serotonin, whatever the hell those things are called. It's affecting that stuff, right? The serotonin, and little old sugar is affecting these things, but. As the esteemed sugar researcher, Dr. Robert Lustig, says, this is a dose-dependent situation. You're taking a little freaking pill for an SSRI, right? This is 150 pounds of the stuff a year you're pounding through your body. Your brain, dopamine, serotonin, they don't ever get a break from. And the proven science is that people who ingest a lot, who have a big habit, have what's called down-regulated dopamine receptors, right? And so they have less of them. So they have to have some of this so they get more dopamine so they feel better. So it's a vicious cycle that just continues.
Yeah, it is.
It's hard, man. It's a re-education. Dr. Lustig, again, I love the guy. I mean, he's just the greatest researcher, really committing his life to this. Got a law degree so he could affect policy after in his 50s, so he could, after a whole career as a doctor, who was studying this with children, But what he says, this is a 20 or 30 year educational process to get people to understand this, like drinking and driving, or smoking in public, or condoms in bathrooms, these kind of things that are, when science says, seatbelts, science says this is a better move, this is a better way to do this, then sooner or later society's got to come around.
Yeah, yeah. I have this image in my head. I want to run it by through you real quick before we kind of wrap up this conversation. But there back in the 1980s, I believe there was a rat study where the rat was in a dark cage by itself. It got addicted. It had a choice between food and cocaine. It picked cocaine till it died. Yep. This study then said like drugs are addictive, yada, yada, yada. But previous studies or subsequent studies, more recent, I saw a TED talk about this. They put the rats in like a great environment, lots of sunshine, mates, food, playthings, and they don't really go for the sugar and cocaine. I'm coming from a background too of intuitive eating, and so I'm more biased, I'll say, towards the lifestyle thing. If you have a great lifestyle, if you're emotionally happy, yada, 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 that you won't be addicted to substances. I'm wondering, like, if someone has a great lifestyle, is sugar still addictive in that situation?
I'm very familiar with Jonathan Harry and the Rat Park studies. I'm studied it extensively myself, and I understand where you're coming from. I really do. And I'm not, it's like the abstinence thing. I had a little issue, and it was interesting when I saw your stuff come up on my, when the booker put you in with me. It's like the intuitive eating stuff, because we've actually had some funny laughs about, what do you think about, from really advanced educators, what do you think about intuitive eating? A sugar addict that's trying to cure it through intuitive eating. She says, "Yeah, you have an intuitive sugar addict."
Yeah,
and I hate to.
No, I'm
fine.
Like, yeah, like I have those same feelings as well.
It makes for better podcasting, I guess. But we can't agree on everything. But what I'm saying is that you're 100% right. Your future has got to be better than your past, or you're not getting over either one. You're not getting over sugar and any drugs or whatever. You're not getting where you want to go. And that's a lot of work. And that's a lot of, people think of it as kind of soft science or woo-woo, vision boards and meditation and, visualization, these kind of things are, that people really have not been trained in. So I think that stuff's important. And I think that, having a great life is important. But like I said, with the kind of snide thing is like, if your body is biochemically, is this the right word? Predisposed to this type of addiction or this type of soothing. And if you had it in the womb, and if you've like been an overweight person your whole life and you've never really had any way to soothe without, you probably need a reconstruction of the way that you deal with your emotional life, the way that you deal with the stuff that's going on in your life, and your hurt and your angst and your everything else. And so in that way, Dr. Lustig also says you can't outrun your biochemistry, right? And that's what I see all the time. It doesn't matter how great people are doing. I mean, I have Olympic athletes. I have people who are really high performance folks in business and even therapists who are treating people, but they cannot outrun their biochemistry. So every time they re-ingest, the vicious cycle starts again. And when they are abstinent, the cycle goes away, they calm down, they have time to do the other soothing methods. And so, it's pattern recognition, okay? It's just seeing it for a decade, actually 30 years, but really seriously working on it and really working with thousands of people in the last 4 or 5 years to really just see it. The same thing happens over and over and over and over and over and over again. If you decide that abstinence is not for you after X amount of months or years even, you end up back in the same place. And that I don't know, and diagnostically we cannot answer this yet. Is it the chicken and the egg thing? Was it your brain, your lifestyle, or was it that your body biochemistry couldn't handle it? I don't know. But what I do know is that the people that are successful, that fall to a right-sized body, they literally cure diabetes and about 100 other maladies, abstain from sugar and flour. Those are the success stories. And the moderation people, they just go back and forth, and some with varying degrees of success. Like they get to a good weight, but then they got some other thing going on, whatever. But I can't predict the answer for everyone, but I'm just telling you my experience of the people who go abstinent, because you can always start again. I mean, you go abstinent for 5 or 6 months, 3 months, whatever. You can always say, pick up a candy bar at any store. No problem.
I hear you. I feel this. I feel the same way with, if someone is predisposed to a sugar chemical, that going abstinent probably might be the best thing, especially when it's coupled with this education around reward systems, around self-soothing, around these types of things. I feel like there's a lot of agreement actually too. Like, intuitive eating, it gets a woo-woo rap. But I really feel that a principle that's so important is this whole self-soothing thing, being able to recognize your emotions, soothe down. I mean, it seems like there's actually more commonality. There's a lot of commonality around the soothing aspect. Real quick, I just want to get your opinion too. So if someone is predisposed to sugar, you'd recommend abstain, self-soothe, education. If someone's in the middle group where they're maybe, it seems like that group where they're not
go either way.
Yeah. It could go either way.
One thing I will tell you, and I don't want to come up, because I think I scare people sometimes, and I don't want to.
You don't scare me. I love it.
As a hard.
No, you're good.
Is that I have 4 female educators, sugar addiction, make their living coaching sugar. Right, that's what they do for a living, and all 4 of them now, after a period of abstinence, ingest sugar at a birthday or occasionally, right? And they're very open about it. They'll write about it, right? And they'll say, they feel like crap, or they'll tell you exactly if it ended up being 3 or 4 days or a little binge or whatever. But I think that they have gone to the rat park, if you will. Their life has gotten better. They understand what's going on. They've cured, I'm not so much cured, but they've healed up some of their pathways in their brain. And the rewiring is not complete maybe, but it's much, much better. They know that this is a problem, and that they make their living doing this, and they ingest a little bit of sugar. But they did take a period of time where they didn't, right? And they came back to it. Personally, I don't want to risk it. That's just me, but
This makes so much sense to me.
Yeah.
That's what I love about these interviews, is I get to connect more of these. It's a nuanced thing. It's very nuanced.
Sure it is.
Sure
it is.
So last couple of questions. Where you have two food groups on Facebook, I believe. Facebook Addiction Unlimited and Facebook Quit Sugar Now. Is that
no, Quit Sugar Now is just the Facebook page.
Oh,
it's
I see.
a public-facing page. I have a private group. Usually those are coaching students, but I do let a few folks in. It's the second largest sugar addiction group. It's like 36 or 700 people. There's a larger one. They focus a lot on keto, which, that's a preference. We focus a little more on the things that you and I have been talking about. But yeah, I mean, we're on Facebook in both private and public facing groups. And I have a little sugar-free kids group too. So.
Nice. Any other projects you're involved in right now? Where can people contact you?
Well, one of the things that is really exciting right now is we do every year a summit, and it's at quitsugarsummit.com. And this will be our 5th year. Actually, I've been interviewing folks for about 7 or 8 years, and we put them all together. And you can go to quitsugarsummit.com, and it's all a couple of the authors that I've mentioned and researchers, and about 40 or 50 other interviews of folks who basically have been researching this stuff in academic ivory towers, and now they're coming out publicly with this information. They're not afraid of the sugar industry anymore, and they're just bringing the information out. And really good stuff for folks that are researching this and trying to find out what's right for them.
Got you. Nice. The book Last Resort Sugar Detox Guide, that's on Amazon.
Correct.
Excited?
That book is free in the United States to download. It's I think 99 cents in all the other English speaking, or you can get the hard copy, but you can download it for nothing. Just go to Amazon.
Nice. And then Mike, you're at sugaraddiction.com.
Sugaraddiction.com is the original site. Yeah, that's.
And then also Quit Sugar Summit.
Quit Sugar Summit. Yeah.
Quit Sugar Summit.
Yeah.
Got you. And then the final question I always ask people before wrapping up is, what's your biggest eating enlightenment? What's one of your biggest eating enlightenments? And eating enlightenment is where you saw reality differently. You had a light bulb moment where you just saw reality differently. You had an insight. What's been one of those?
Wow.
Your 30-year eating journey, recovery to where you're at nowadays, sugar and everything.
Well, it's a little bit more of the same, but it's kind of a little bit of curveball. One thing we didn't talk about more than I want to usually do is fructose. And the fructose is, table sugar is half fructose and half glucose. And about 27 years into this journey, I was still a grain eater and rolled oats and rice I liked. And I ate quite a bit of fruit and some fruit juice, mostly orange juice, fresh, organic and all that. But I realized a couple of my board members started to talk to me about this. And I was literally having little lapses, mental kind of gaps, like forgetting short things, not a lot, but, and then I literally, my hair was falling out, my periodontal, I had cavities for the first time in forever. My eyesight was going a little bad, and I had pimples in my 50s on my face, right? And so I said, okay, I'll give it a try. So I quit fruit and grains, and everything that I just mentioned went away in less than a month, 2 months, right? That was, to me, the anti-sugar guy, like the answer to the fruit thing and the oats thing and the grains thing and that kind of thing blew me away. That was probably more enlightening to me than the early days and the abstinence from sugar and flour and caffeine.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's amazing.
It really was amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, it was to me, like you, I think I can tell from reading your stuff about being a monk and cutting. 3 of my younger brothers were wrestlers. They all cut weight. One of them now went to the other extreme, and the others have seemingly maintained, but they drink a lot too. Anyway, what I'm getting at is that you're seeking the best for you. And I find that the people who have the most success have that kind of attitude. They're trying to find the best life for themselves,
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. I know this, I say I'm on this food and spiritual journey where they say on yoga, how you practice on the mat is how you show up in life, so that when you're practicing for life. And the same thing with food, right? It's a skill that helps you become a better person.
Right.
Yeah,
right. Exactly.
Thank you, Michael, for coming on. I really enjoyed your today.
Well, I really appreciate you having. I really appreciate your questions there.